want to go in depth a little bit more about coaches and coaching. John Wooden has 10 titles. Gino Auriemma
Yes.
has 10 titles. Now, we can start making comparisons. Who's the greatest coach of all time? But
I would put what Gino's done up against any coach in any sport in any era. 10 titles.
as would I.
Okay.
Here's the difference, though. I think that Auriemma and Wooden are over here, and Mike Krzyzewski is over here.
What's the difference between being over here and being over there? What's happening in between?
And it's not for the obvious reasons you would think. See, I'm guessing you would think that I have Auriemma and Wooden over here because they each have 10 titles, and Krzyzewski's over here because he only has 5. I'm saying Krzyzewski's over here because he is the greatest, and I'm saying Auriemma and Wooden are over here because they have built-in advantages that this guy doesn't have.
What's Gino's advantage?
I'm so glad you asked, Chad. Thank you for driving the show today.
Well, you're very welcome.
Okay. The top 5 players in the country pretty much go to UConn.
Whoa. Notre Dame has great players.
They have great players.
They've beat Notre Dame the last 3 years. You think Notre Dame is not going out and trying their best to out-recruit him to everything
Gino
Notre
wins.
Dame...
Gino, listen, Gino Auriemma, this is what Gino Auriemma does, okay? Gino Auriemma is the John Calipari of recruiting. The difference is he gets to keep all these girls for 4 years.
Whoa, no. It's Notre Dame. What Catholic parent raises their child up who's an athlete and doesn't have visions dancing in their head of their child playing at Notre Dame? So there's a tremendous advantage at Notre Dame. So to brush aside Notre Dame and say UConn gets every great player is absurd.
They get the majority. They get the majority of the best players.
Brush aside what Pat Summitt and Tennessee did, because Gino won titles when Pat Summitt was still on top.
I agree.
And when Tennessee was still really good. So to brush aside his 10 titles, this awesome achievement, when the all-time greatest women's coach ever, not women's sports coach, but woman as a gender coach ever, was still competing at the top of her game. I give Gino a tremendous amount of credit because, again, there's no amazing advantage that UConn had over Tennessee and no amazing advantage that they have over Notre Dame, yet still they've dominated the last 15 years.
I agree they have dominated, but the competition in women's basketball is really 2 or 3 teams. That's it. All you have to do is beat 1 or 2 teams. That's why UConn goes out and wins by 40 in the NCAA tournament for like its opening 3-4 games. It is so lopsided between UConn, Notre Dame, and just throwing the team of your choice, Maryland if you want to. You have your top 4 teams in women's college basketball. They might as well just skip the NCAA tournament and go directly to the Final Four. There's no point in even having a field of 64. You have 4 great teams and everybody else. Just go. I mean, I've never filled out an NCAA women's bracket, but I'd be willing to bet if I looked back, you would see chalk consistently all number 1 seeds over the last 5 years. You might have a number 2 in there. You don't see that in the men's tournament.
There was 3 number 1 seeds this year in the men's tournament, in the Final Four. 3.
Fine. What was last year's final? A 9 versus an 8? Or a 7 versus an 8?
But that's an outlier. More number
then
1
you
seeds.
Have Florida Gulf Coast going to the Final Four. You number 1 seeds make it to the Final Four in women's college basketball all the time. Gino Auriemma has 2 or 3 teams to compete with, including Muffet McGraw's Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I would agree with you. As for John Wooden had advantages that nobody else had.
Like what?
Where do I begin? I will start with this. When it comes to the NCAA tournament, 1970, South Carolina Gamecocks, 25-3, best team in the ACC, right? Well, they were. Lost their conference tournament, didn't make it into the NCAA tournament. 1974, North Carolina State, number 2 team in the country, played Maryland, number 3 team in the country. Maryland lost. Maryland didn't get into the NCAA tournament. Hold on a second.
What does that have to do with UCLA?
It has to do with
It was 3,000 miles away from Westwood, where UCLA is located.
No, my point is, when UCLA is winning national titles, they never had to go up against the best of the best. They only had to go up against conference champions.
What's that got to do with John Wooden's greatness? He does not determine how the structure of the tournament works, nor is he part of the selection committee. He just plays who is in front of him and kicks their butts.
I'm not trying to take away from John Wooden being a great coach.
Yeah, you are.
He was an
That's clearly what you're doing.
I'm talking LA guy here. He was an unbelievable coach,
right.
An unbelievable man, but he had built-in advantages that Mike Krzyzewski doesn't have. Mike Krzyzewski has to compete against tougher teams. And when you look at the way John Wooden recruited, he basically plucked everybody out of California, but never had to leave his backyard except for Lou Alcindor. And the guy that brought him Lou Alcindor was involved in a money laundering scheme, because that guy brought Lou Alcindor over to his house and paid for cars, paid for clothes, helped women, some of the players' girlfriends, get abortions. It was bad. It was tainted, and the NCAA never got involved in that stuff. Those were bought championships with Alcindor.
Boosters and payments to players have been a part of college sports as long as there's been college sports.
Right.
So to push back on John Wooden and not push back against Bear Bryant is just disingenuous at best.
Okay.
To think somehow someone else is doing in that era, where we're talking the 50s, 60s, 70s, was doing it cleanly, and this guy only won because he had a booster. That's not the reality of the situation. Boosters and illegal payments have been part of it forever.
But I think there's a difference, because there's a small difference. In football, you have how many players? 50-something
on
a college roster.
You're allowed to have 85 guys on college scholarship. Now,
so how many
used to be 100.
Okay. So back then it was 100 guys.
Actually, there was no limit. Back, I'm not sure how far you want to go back then, but it used to be no limits. So certain teams had 200 guys on scholarship.
So boosters can bring in, let's say they bring in 20 guys.
Right.
Okay, that is certainly going to help your team.
Mm-hmm.
But in basketball, where it's clearly a numbers game, when you bring in Lou Alcindor to play center, and you only need 5 guys on the court, that's a huge advantage.
So
Bill Walton came out of Wooden's backyard. Goodrich came out of that backyard. Sidney Wicks came out of that backyard. He never had to leave.
I don't get this argument. So is Phil Jackson not a great coach because he had Michael Jordan?
Michael Jordan did something that Doug Collins couldn't do, which was bring guys together. I'm not taking away from...
Yeah, you are.
No, what I'm saying...
that's how I feel.
You're getting agitated, aren't you?
No, because it doesn't align with the reality to be able to pick and choose a couple of facts and then tarnish the greatness of the greatest coach ever.
No.
The greatest coach ever. When coaches want to learn about coaching, they read Wooden books. He has coached more coaches,
right?
More great coaches who will say he's the greatest coach ever than any other coach in history.
As a philosopher of sports, no one is better. As a basketball coach, I don't think any reasonable person would not put him, pro or college, in their top 3. Great man. I'm not trying to take away from him. And I'm not suggesting John Wooden today could not do what Mike Krzyzewski is doing today. All I'm saying is Mike Krzyzewski's road to a national title is tougher than it was for John Wooden. That's all I'm suggesting.
Does Duke get the opportunity to, with just a small handful of other teams, to compete for the top 10 players in the country every year? So how is that any different than what John Wooden had? How's that any different? It's exactly the same, isn't it?
When you have a booster like Sam Gilbert, that helps a lot. But
you're trying to compare different eras. Other teams, basketball teams in that same eras, had moneyed boosters as well. Does Duke run a cleaner program than what was standard for the 70s and 60s? Yes, but that's not a fair comparison because UCLA's program was as clean as other programs of that era.
So that's kind of like saying it's okay that Lance Armstrong did PEDs because all the other riders did it.
In order to compete, that's what Lance Armstrong had to do. Did he need to throw all his teammates under the bus? Did he need to ruin people's lives and careers? Of course he did. Is Lance Armstrong a good person? No. But was he the best rider of his era? Clearly he was. And were other guys doing the same type of drugs that he was doing? Yes, they were. In order to win and compete in the Tour de France, you had to be dirty.